Hello and welcome to a brand new series called Wildwatch Out of Africa with me, Chris Packham. Now we've left the shores of the south of England firmly behind and travelled to Kenya to meet a few of Africa's biggest and boldest animals. But we'll also be looking at a few of the smaller species, the kind of things that tourists normally overlook. Well, our programme this week is absolutely packed. We don't want to waste any time. So without further ado, let's see what's coming up in the next few weeks. On Wild Encounters, I'll be crossing both land and water in search of Africa's most exciting animals. Whether it's bad-tempered black rhino or flamboyant flamingos, I'm guaranteed to be nose to nose with nature. In Animal Orphans, I'll be visiting rehabilitation and reintroduction centres, which are dedicated to looking after the not-so-lucky African animals who need a little helping hand. On Safari Specials, I'll be in search of the Big Five, but taking a few rather unorthodox methods to find them. And finally, I'll be meeting the locals in It's a Wild Life as they work, rest and play alongside the wealth of wildlife that lives here in Kenya. But now, because in my less than humble and ever adamant opinion, the best things in life are birds, that's where we're going to start with our very first wild encounter. This is the one I've been waiting for, a day's birding in Kenya. Now there are about 700 or 800 species to be found here. I've literally only just come out of my hotel and already seen 30 or 40. Brilliant. Like most of the wildlife here in Kenya, bold is definitely better, and that's certainly the case when it comes to birds. Just look at these superb starlings, living up to their name. But what I'm after this morning is an ornithological experience with an expert angler. The general gist is that at 8 o'clock in the morning, we're in the middle of Lake Baringo. We're going to try and throw a fish out to lure an African fish eagle in. And the fish have balsa wood pushed into them so that they float on the surface and don't sink. All we've got to hope is that the eagle is hungry. Now these eagles occur all over Africa. I suppose they kind of do the job of our osprey. They feed on small fish, but they're also scavengers, and you'll see them along shorelines picking up anything that's left there. A striking bird too, with a chestnut back and a gleaming white head. Should be great if it comes down. Wow. Fantastic. When it came in, it was absolutely hunkered down like that, looking really hard. Poor fish didn't have a chance. Look at that. Well, that was absolutely fantastic, but apparently there's another treat in store, the world's biggest heron. Superb. It's a beautiful looking bird, but also it's the largest heron in the world. Goliath heron, living up to its name. It's massive, massive, about double the size of our grey herons. Look at that. You can see the fish in its throat. Well, swooping eagles and the world's biggest heron are pretty good, but Kenya has got more to offer when it comes to bird spectacles. Now, on their own, flamingos are quite gangly, ungainly birds. Long, thin legs, their beaks are upside down, beady little eyes. You know, the sort of thing that you'd hold upside down and hit hedgehogs with if you were in Alice in Wonderland. But when you get 1 million of them together in one place, they transform themselves into the greatest ornithological spectacle in the world. Just look at that colour. Just listen to this sound. It is just simply staggering. For me at least, probably the greatest sight on earth. a wall of pink that stretches from one horizon to the other. These birds have all come here to feed, and they feed on microscopic algae, which they glean by using their tongue to pump water coming in through the sides of their bills through a complex series of combs. So effectively, they're straining the water. Because each food item is so infinitesimally small, they have to feed nearly all day just to get enough energy to keep going. Now, the one extraordinary thing about this place is that the water in that lake is so alkaline that it's caustic. If I were to swim in it, it would literally strip the skin from my bones. And yet these birds are able to walk in it all day, unless they get a little nick on their leg. And then sadly, within 3 or 4 days, they perish. Now, it must be said that I'm not often lost for words, but wow, this is for me ornithological nirvana. I mean, I simply do not know what I'm going to do next. Can I go down the park and look at seagulls? No. Well, look, if the candy pink of those flamingos was just too gaudy for you, how about the flamboyance of these things? These are crested or crowned cranes. And if you ask me, they're pretty special. I've always had a thing about cranes. They remind me of elegant 1950s women, people like Audrey Hepburn, dressed in Chanel, and I've often fantasised about taking one to the Ritz. And on that absurd note, I think we better move on. If you want to see more exotic birds and you don't want to travel so far from home, then try Bird World in Surrey or Amazon World on the Isle of Wight. And if it's raptors that you're after, then the Hawk Conservancy in Hampshire or Eagle Heights in Kent would be the place to visit. But now it's time for some monkey business in Animal Orphans. Sunrise over Africa, and it's an early start. This morning I'm off to see an animal that's not actually native to Kenya, but has become extremely threatened in the wild. So this is one of the few places in the world where it's got a safe haven from poachers. I'm joining Annie Oliver-Kona, who runs the Sweetwater's Chimp Sanctuary, home for abandoned and orphaned animals who have been affected by wildlife crimes. Annie, chimpanzees are always in the top 10 of everyone's favourite animal. If they're not number one, they're always close to it. Why do you think they have such an enduring appeal to people?
I think it's because they're so much like us and people see themselves in them.
Despite the fact that they're one of our favourite animals, they are severely threatened. Loss of habitat is one thing, but what else is worrying in terms of their conservation?
One of the big problems is that they're being hunted for the meat, and that's turned very commercial. They go out and they hunt a whole family of chimpanzees. The baby is not worth the meat price. It's so small. So they keep it alive and try to sell it alive on the black market, either, if they can, export it abroad or to local people to keep as a pet. So all these chimps, they've been picked up from market or vendors, or they have been confiscated in private homes from people that's kept them illegally.
Tell me a bit about the sanctuary here at Sweetwater's, its origins and of course its objectives.
The reason really why they built a sanctuary here in Kenya was that to get people to realise the problems that the chimps are facing in the wild. There are lots of chimpanzee sanctuaries in the countries where they come from, like Cameroon, Congo, Gabon, etc. But people don't exactly go there on holiday. And we needed to spread the word out to the Western world. And Kenya is a tourist country, and therefore it was decided to put a sanctuary here.
One of the unique things is that they've got so much space here.
We're lucky in that respect. We've got 2 enclosures on each side of the river. The river is the dividing point.
And they don't cross the river, do they?
No, they don't swim.
They don't lie in the water.
Mine do. When the tree falls over, that's a good bridge, so we have to cut them down.
Annie, you put a tremendous amount of effort into looking after these animals. What's the reward?
The reward is to see that the chimps develop into being chimpanzees rather than semi-human beings, and that they can live a chimpanzee life with the social behaviour that they should have in the groups. That, to us, is the reward.
do they come to this spot every morning?
Just about, because we scatter food around here, and they know that.
What do they get?
A variation, it's a mixture of vegetables and fruit, depending on what the season is.
I'm going to sit down and just take a look at them, if that's all right. They are one of those creatures you need to watch to learn about, aren't they?
They definitely are. You have to do that. You have to sit down and look at them.
Okay. This is an extraordinary opportunity to sit only 20 metres away from a group of chimpanzees and enjoy their behaviour, learn a bit about them. But you know, they're so close to us, so similar in their anatomy and their behaviour that I personally can't help find that a bit threatening, a bit uncomfortable. These are my relatives. Welcome back to Wildwatch Out of Africa with me, Chris Packham. Now for the next few weeks we're leaving the best of British behind, all its bats and badgers, and we come here to Kenya to look at some of the planet's most fantastic wildlife, things like these African elephants. But sadly we're going to have to leave them behind too, because it's time for our safari special. This week I'm going on a safari with a difference, a suburban safari here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Now when people here say that it's a jungle out there, they really mean it. This is an extraordinary sight, a real vision of century 21. Behind me a couple of ancient animals, a pale rhino, a cow and her calf, and behind them the skyscrapers of modern Nairobi. Now I kind of like the contrast between the wild and the man-made structures there. But then again, it would have been nice to have been here in the 1920s when Nairobi would have just been a couple of hotels and a railway station. You know, it really is quite incongruous. I'm looking out here and I can see wildebeest and zebra wandering around in front of Nairobi's second airport with lots of light aircraft taking off. There's such a diversity of wildlife literally right here on the doorstep. How about this for a morning's birding? Not often you get to go out and see the world's largest bird. Here are a group of female or young ostrich. They're picking very delicately at some seeds, I presume, or maybe the leaves on these bushes here. Extraordinary birds. Well, hardly birds at all really. They always strike me as being more mammalian. This is actually quite a small herd of buffalo. Sometimes they number, many thousands. Now in many places you'll only see them in great numbers at night. In the day they remain very cautious, they're frequently predated by lions and they spend most of their time hiding in thick cover. And you can judge by their bulk that they need to spend a lot of time grazing. They get to be very, very heavy animals, the big males nudging a ton. The span of their horns can also reach up to about 1.75 to 2 metres. That's 6 old-fashioned feet. Along with hippos, buffalo are often known as the most dangerous animals in Africa, simply because people who are following their game trails through the thick bush stumble across them, perhaps cows with a calf or one of the grouchy old bulls, and of course if one of these things charges you, you're in big trouble. Now you can see some pretty gruesome things in many of the world's capital cities, but you're not going to top that. This lioness is just finishing her breakfast on wildebeest. A whole group of them here have had a bit of a fest, and there are in fact several carcasses here which these lions have been feeding on. Most of them are finished. I mean, look at that one over there. It's got a massively fat stomach and all it can do is sleep it off. snoozing away. But in the meantime, she just can't resist a few more morsels. Just look at that. See the bone on the wildebeest's leg there. She's just trying to strip the last piece of flesh off. One thing's for sure, there's probably no greater place where you can appreciate the fact that death is essential to life, especially here out on these plains. I mean, the wildebeest probably wouldn't agree, not at this stage, but then the lion certainly would. Now, Nairobi National Park is certainly not top of the pops when it comes to wilderness experiences. It's not the Maasai Mara, it's not Nakuru or Amboseli, but nevertheless it's extremely accessible, and you can pop out from your hotel and see a wealth of wildlife in a couple of hours. So really, you just can't beat it. Now, Nairobi National Park here might seem a world away from the south of England, simply because it is, but it's right alongside the capital city of Kenya. So in a way, there are plenty of parallels to places like the New Forest in Hampshire, which is close to Bournemouth, Poole and Southampton. But of course, as soon as you get here, the contrast becomes extremely striking. In the south coast of England, our biggest predator is the fox, and here, it's the lion. And just look at this huge chap behind me who's completely gorged himself, and he's doing what lions always do once they're fed: sleep it off. Now, each week I'm going to be meeting a Kenyan individual who's devoted a lot of their time to protecting the animals here. Today, it's Rick Anderson, who's very keen on his giraffes. Now, it's not every day you get to take breakfast with an exotic species, but today is a special treat. I'm here at Giraffe Manor, just outside Nairobi, Kenya's capital, and this is Lynn, a 3-year-old Rothschild giraffe. And every morning, when you're a guest at the house here, you have to share your breakfast with these animals. Thankfully, they don't like the toast, which is just as well, because I'm quite peckish myself. And they have their own special giraffe nuts. Now let's have a look at that tongue. My mother would probably question the hygiene of this event, but you know, I think it's worth putting up with a bit of saliva for a treat like this. Okay. Now how am I going to eat my toast? It's giraffe saliva, isn't it? The Anderson family who live here have had a long history with Rothschild giraffe. Betty first rescued 5 of these animals in the mid-70s when she saw this subspecies becoming critically endangered in Kenya. When Betty died in 1995, her son Rick took over as guardian, and since then his bond with the giraffes has been just as strong. He opened his home to the general public 15 years ago with the main aim of promoting conservation to tourist and local school children. I dropped in to meet him. Rick, what's so special about Rothschild's giraffe?
Well, their specialty really is their rareness. They are one of 9 subspecies in Africa. There are 3 here in East Africa. But the Rothschild subspecies were in western Kenya, which is heavily populated and arable. And the population was taking away their habitats, and there were only 130 left on one 18,000-acre cattle ranch.
The story's much better today, though, isn't it? So how has the Giraffe Centre here helped reverse the trend?
Over the years, my parents were able to raise funds to have breeding groups move from this one endangered area to 5 different safe areas, and now there are about 300.
I think a lot of people perceive that African kids grow up with the game, but I mean that's just not the case these days. Many of them live in cities or in suburbia.
Very much so, especially today. 100 years ago, wildlife controlled 90% of the area and people 10, and in the last 100 years it's completely reversed. And people in the cities obviously don't see them. The Nairobi National Park here, you need to have a vehicle to be able to drive in, and most Kenyans can't afford vehicles to drive in. The ones that live out in the tea areas and the coffee areas, the game has been moved out of those areas a long time ago. It's really only the pastoralist tribes, the Maasai and the Samburu of the north, that see game.
And how do these kids respond to seeing the animals? I mean, are they terribly excited?
If I ever have a late morning sleep, I could get woken up by them laughing and screaming and shouting down here. It's quite an experience because a lot of the kids do come from the slums. We have a program to bring the poor kids out here in buses. They don't have transportation. And these kids haven't seen trees, much less animals.
Rick, what is it about giraffes that that you think that grabs people? I mean, what is it personally that you find so exciting about these animals?
mainly I think it is their beauty and their uniqueness as well as their character. They're gentle giants. Where can you find an animal that weighs 1.5 tons that comes and eats out of your hand and you don't have to be worried about being eaten?
Can you imagine life without giraffes? I mean, they play a great role in it on a day-to-day basis.
I would hate to have to think about life without a giraffe. I am, as I say, half of my life have been on this property with giraffes, so to live someplace else without giraffe would be awful.
You know, when I was 5 or 6 years old, I used to beg my mother on an almost daily basis to take me to Southampton City Zoo, and one of my earliest memories was of a giraffe reaching down over the top of its cage and licking me with its long purple tongue. And since then I've been fortunate to encounter them in all sorts of places, but never anything like this. Because here, the giraffes are against the backdrop of Africa, those acacia trees, and I can hear the twitter of the local birds. What a wonderful experience. Worth waiting about 33 years for. You know, it's always refreshing to see a situation like that, a hard core of very few people whose tireless endeavour and enthusiasm goes so far to save a single species. Sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. Do join me again next week when I head out after dark to see what creeps, crawls, scurries and charges in the dark of the African bush. See you then. Welcome to Wildwatch out of Africa with me, Chris Packham. And what a start to the programme. On the tip of my finger is a leopard. In fact, not one, but two in this tree behind me. Now, leopards are relatively common animals here in Africa, but they're notoriously difficult to see. So this is quite literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Just look at that. But what else have we got coming up on this week's programme? Well, I'll be heading out after dark to see which creatures come out in the bush when the sun goes down. And I'll be meeting some animal orphans who have a very famous Hollywood dad, the Real Wild Bunch. And we'll be spending a day in the life of the Maasai tribe, and I'll be sampling a, well, unique and definitely unorthodox breakfast dish. And there are 6.5 billion people on this planet at the moment, but I've got to tell you that today, without question, I am the luckiest one of them. But before I get too smug, let's take a look at this week's wild encounter, where I get to meet another one of Africa's most dangerous animals, a bad-tempered brute you certainly don't want to mess with. Africa, and it's freezing cold, but then it is just after 6 in the morning, and I'm not complaining about getting up early because this morning is going to be terribly exciting. We're going out tracking rhino on foot. Now, as you know, these animals do have a foul temper, a bad reputation, and can be extremely dangerous. So I'm going to take the advice of our tracker Dixon and our driver Anthony. Better give them a hand to get the vehicle ready. Now, these trekkers have got one of the most dangerous jobs in the whole of Africa. It's not only bad-tempered wild animals they have to keep a watchful eye on, they also have to deal with ruthless poachers who literally shoot to kill, and sometimes that even means people. Wow. Dixon, it's a massive place. Where do we start? Where do we start to look?
We start where the rhino has put the dungs.
So we come all the way out here to look for a dung heap.
Yeah, we have to come all the way to look for the dung heap because it's the easiest way to get the rhino instead of patrolling the whole place.
You like to start at the bottom?
Yeah.
And work up?
Yeah.
That's a joke. This is the midden.
Oh, this is the midden. So maybe the rhino is just somewhere down here because even the footprints you see here is almost fresh.
So we should go down this way, yeah?
Yeah, we should follow the footprints and then try to see if we can get him just close here.
Okay. A bit later, we're joined by two more armed rangers for added protection. We're very close to the rhinos now. The guy's just taken to a very thorny tree because we're in quite dense cover. The danger is, of course, that we'll come across them too quickly, too close. So you have to be extremely quiet. one of the eagle-eyed rangers has spotted a rhino in thick cover.
We should go. Yeah, we go.
And Dixon was determined to give me a closer look.
We found the rhino, but unfortunately has found us. He's crossed our tracks and it can smell where we've been. So at the moment, he's coming right towards us. And obviously it's kind of important we don't let it get that close. So we're beating a retreat. It's pretty exciting stuff.
All of a sudden, the animal that's well known for its bad temper had a mood swing. And when this happens, it's not a good idea to be too close.
Is he a male?
Yeah, he's a male.
He was after us.
Yeah, he was after us.
And he would have charged us if he'd found us.
Yeah. You see, he's a quite big male.
Yeah. And what's he doing now? Just listening, getting comfortable?
Yeah, you see, he's not comfortable, actually. When he's comfortable, he'll have to sleep.
Now about 30 metres away from this rhino. It's actually dangerous even to speak in a low whisper like this. There's no question that being here in a very real sense of danger, because something spooks this animal when it comes out. Pandemonium.
The sleeping giant dozed his way through the heat of the midday sun, but our wild encounter wasn't over yet.
After being in the bushes all morning and not getting really fantastic views, I mean, the rhino is now moving through some really sparse cover, even in the open. What an animal. His horns are immaculate. Typically in captivity, they rub them against any bars they have in their caging and damage them, but these are beautiful, long, smooth. But those horns can be the downfall of these rhinoceros because they're priceless. They're wanted in the Far East for use as an aphrodisiac. It doesn't even work, but nevertheless, in the last 25 years, the population of black rhinos has decreased by 90%. He doesn't know how lucky he is, but I know how lucky I am, getting a fantastic view. Well, I just can't tell you. That was the wildest of all wild encounters. I'm not ashamed to say that when I was that close to the black rhino, the hairs on the back of my neck were standing on end. But you know, there's another one out here at the moment, although I'm at a very safe distance. Just look at that. What an absolute beauty. In the clear sunshine, you can see it extremely well. And just to its side, I can see another pair of ears, which probably mean that this is a female with its calf there down in the grass.
Now, if you're after a wild encounter with a rhino or any other of the big five, but want to stay closer to home, then Marwell Zoo in Hampshire has the friendlier white variety. Longleat Safari Park in Wiltshire is renowned for their impressive pride of lions. And of course, there's Port Lim in Kent, whose elephants are truly superb.
Now, you know, we're very lucky to be looking at these black rhino. They suffered terribly here from poaching in the past, but wildlife crime isn't confined to the African continent. It occurs all over the world. Only a couple of years ago, I went to a site in the New Forest where a pair of Montagu's harriers needed guarding around the clock from egg thieves. Let's move on now to our safari special. It's my first night in Africa, and I can't tell you how excited I am. Now, the fact that it's night is not in any way an inconvenience, because when it gets dark, Africa really comes to life. Look at what I've just found. It's an absolutely monstrous beetle, a bit like one of our maybugs or cockchafers. But then the whole of the night is alive with insects. Just listen to it. Most of those noises you can hear are being produced by cicadas. But there's masses of moths buzzing around, and of course all of these insects means there's plenty of food for bats.
OK, bats and bugs are all very well, but I wanted to see the larger creatures Africa has to offer. And the best way to do this was to join our ranger Dixon on a nocturnal safari.
What are we likely to see tonight, Dixon?
Maybe an
zoos, maybe you might see lions or elephants, a lot of things. Mostly, I'll be very happy if you see big five.
Big five?
Yeah.
A buffalo particularly active at night, Dixon?
Yeah, because that's when the time it's very cold and they feed very nicely, and when they come to the water hole.
Have you ever been charged by buffalo?
Yeah, once we were charged, but actually we managed to help ourselves.
How did you escape?
We just escaped and jumped over a tree, and then the tree broke down, and then we went to another tree. So these animals are quite dangerous.
It sounds like a bit of a caper.
Yeah.
And there's some zebra here as well.
Zebras. We have plenty of zebras in the game reserve. So mostly they graze at night because you see always they're on move because they're so scared of lions.
Yeah.
So if something scared them here, they run almost 2 kilometers before they stop and try to see what was that.
That's a spotted hyena, yeah?
Yeah.
A real scavenger. Old hyenas have got a terrible reputation. Do you think there's any truth in the fact that they would ever attack human beings?
Yeah, sometimes they do attack, but that's when they are very hungry.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you get them somewhere where they can't help themselves, they just attack you direct.
Oh, he's not going to attack us. He's
No, this one
heading
seems to...
heading into the bush. Yeah. These jackals, they're a bit like our foxes.
Yeah, actually they're just like our foxes, because you see these ones, mostly they get meat from killed from lions and hyenas.
They're scavenging.
Yeah.
But they also eat insects, don't they?
Yeah, they do, but they do for the lions wherever they go.
And are they always around in pairs like this? Because I remember reading somewhere they mated for life.
Yeah, they're mating for life.
It's quite romantic for a jackal. Well, that nocturnal safari was certainly a lot of fun, although I've got to say it was freezing cold and a bit dusty. But take a look at this, because that pair of jackals that we saw have been active in the daytime as well, with some rather grisly results. They've got a young impala, and already they've eaten the best part of the back half of it. It's really making pretty short work of that young impala. It's really cruel. Nature is cruel, there's no question of that. Well, we better leave this scene, I think. It's really not great family viewing, is it? Welcome back to Wildwatch out of Africa. Now, just look at this. What an extraordinary spectacle. I can hardly contain myself. The best things in life are birds, and here are millions and millions and millions of pink ones. It's simply fantastic. Coming up over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be showing you more of Africa's biggest and boldest creatures, but also a few of the small and fascinating ones too. They'll be coming up in a moment, but have you ever heard of that nonsense about water going down the plug hole in the southern hemisphere in a different direction? Well, I've always been sceptical, so I thought I'd try a little experiment. Now today I'm on my way to the William Holden Animal Orphanage. Now William Holden, you'll remember, was an actor whose career spanned 40 years, but what you might not know is that he also had a very keen interest in African animal conservation. But en route I thought I'd stop here at a point of geographical significance, latitude 0, the equator. And whilst you're here, the locals will conduct a rather interesting physical experiment. The Coriolis effect seems to be big business here in Kenya. Whenever you cross the equator, there's always someone ready to show you the experiment for a mere $10. What a bargain. And today, Patrick is our chosen scientist, and the test starts in our own northern hemisphere. It will only go clockwise.
You know this is a fact and there's no way you can change it.
No, this is probably a clockwise straw that you've got here.
No.
It's a special straw with magnets in or something. Right, come on, I've got to see it going anti-clockwise then. A quick 40-metre trip across the equator to the southern hemisphere. I just don't believe it. I'm seeing it with my own eyes. It's going anti-clockwise. You know what?
The earlier you believe it, the better.
You know, I thought this Coriolis effect was something they made up just to confuse you in O-level physics. Come on then, I've got to see it on the equator now. Now Patrick tells me there should be no rotation whatsoever.
Let us apply our straw. Are you a believer now?
I've seen it with my own eyes, but I try not to be gullible with trickery. So what's the trick, Patrick? What is the trick? Come on. Is it the bowl? Is it the straw?
No, this is not a trick, my man.
Do you know what I think? I think all GCSE physics students should be brought to the equator on a field trip. That's what I
Go
think.
and bring them all.
Now this remarkable thing is not a real animal at all. It's a hybrid, and I bet you can guess between which two species. A horse and a zebra, and it's called a zebroid. I have to say, I'm not normally a horsey type of person, but these are extremely attractive. Just look at that beautiful pattern on their skin. They were used as pack animals, a bit like mules, because they're extremely hardy. Meet Speedy. Now he came to Kenya in 1968, and at that time, like many other small kids, I had a pet tortoise at home. Only mine was only that big. But then when you're William Holden, an Oscar-winning actor, and you want a pet tortoise, you can think bigger. This is a Seychelles tortoise, so it's not indigenous to Kenya. But you know, old Speedy here is more than 100 years old. Just look at that tongue. It's a prehensile tongue that's used for pulling foliage off of branches, very similar to a giraffe. But then of course this is no giraffe. This is a unique opportunity to see an animal that you hardly would ever see. For two reasons. These bongo are strictly nocturnal, and also they're Africa's rarest antelope. Now this wonderful animal is called a giraffes, or a black and white colobus monkey. And colobus means mutilated. And if you look very carefully, you can see they only have 4 digits with a tiny thumb at the side. That's probably a very good adaptation for swinging around in the trees, and that's what these animals do. They're extremely arboreal. Now, as you know, the best things in life are birds. But you know what strikes me about this ostrich today is its unbird-like qualities. Just look at those legs. Look at its upright body and long neck. If ever I've seen one, this is a velociraptor. And of course, as you know, it's widely thought that birds evolved from dinosaurs. We'll be visiting another rehabilitation centre next week, but here's a question for you. Do you get fed up with the trials and tribulations of getting to work? You know, is the train late into Waterloo? Do you miss the Isle of Wight ferry? Do you get stuck in a traffic jam on the M25? Well, imagine that between you and work was one of these things. Just look at that lioness. They look pretty demure, pretty sober walking across the plain there, but let me tell you, they are awesomely powerful. And if this animal was standing between you and the office, the boss would be on the phone at 9:05 to the recruitment agency. But you know, there's a whole tribe of people, the Maasai, that put up with these things on a daily basis. You see, for them, it's a wildlife. Just after 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm here at this village on the top of the Maasai Mara Plains in Kenya. I'm going to be spending a day with this extraordinary, well-known and noble tribe of African peoples. Julius and Moses are both wise men in training, which means that when their time comes, they'll offer guidance and wisdom to their community. And being the only 2 villagers that spoke English, they introduced me to their elders, who offered me a traditional morning meal. So, Moses, is it time for breakfast now?
Right.
Yeah? What's on the menu?
We have blood and milk.
Blood and milk, that's good. Toast?
No, there's nothing.
Okay, just blood and milk. Okay, well, let's knuckle down to breakfast then. Well, you can't get much fresher than this, but it's not only milk the cow contributes to breakfast, it's also blood. Now, this may look rather gruesome, but the animal always survives to tell the tale. It's much the same as you and I giving blood, and this cow will have at least 6 months to get over the ordeal. Julius, Moses, this must be a typical Maasai house.
Right.
How many people, Julius, would live in a house this size?
This house is for one family, husband, wife, and the children.
And the children?
Yes.
So 5, 6, maybe 7 people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you better test it first, Moses.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Give it a test. Good vintage?
Delicious.
Is it?
Tasty?
Yeah. Very sort of like a very thick, meaty soup.
Yeah.
I can't see him getting a franchise in a motorway service station for a new type of breakfast bar. It's just not going to catch on. After breakfast, it was time to head off to work with the Maasai, which meant a long, dusty walk in search of fresh grazing lands. So, Julius, what do you do all day to protect the cattle? I mean, what about if there's a pride of lions here?
You see the man looking after, he's having a spear.
Yeah.
A spear for protection of the cows when he sees any enemy.
Any lions?
Any lions.
Are we likely to meet any lions today, do you think?
Oh yeah, there's a plenty of lands now.
Yeah, you're teasing, I can tell. Yeah, no lions, thank goodness. Well, we've had a hot and wind-blown and now potentially rainy day out on the top of the plain here with the Maasai cattle, mulling over all sorts of different things, everything but football in fact, which there was no apparent interest in it. But now it sounds like there's a sing-song inside the village. Are we ready, Julius?
Yes.
So, Julius, these are the young women in the tribe. What are they singing about?
The song all about is about the praising of God for blessing them with rain and also for blessing them to bear children.
And they're praying for rain, and by the looks of it,
Yes.
their wishes are coming true.
They wish it is coming soon.
Because that's good news, isn't it?
Yes.
Because of the drought.
Yes.
It's about 7:10 in the evening now, and the sun's long set over these high plains. I've had an extraordinary day with these people, learning a little bit about their culture. And there's one thing that strikes me. Not only is the environment in which they live extremely fragile and under a lot of threat from us, but then so is their lifestyle. And I sincerely hope that they manage to cope with Century 21 and live here, as they have done for thousands of years, in harmony with the wildlife. Well, sadly, that's all we've got time for on Wildwatch out of Africa. But do join me again next time when I'll be meeting a rather boisterous lion cub, getting a view of the Maasai Mara from high in a hot air balloon, and also having a wild encounter with some crocodiles and some hippos. That is, of course, if we can get the Land Rover out of the mud. See you next time. I better help out, otherwise they'll call me some sort of ponce or something. Hello and welcome to the last in our current series of Wildwatch out of Africa with me, Chris Packham. I'm currently in the Maasai Mara, and behind me is a fabulous group of elephants. What else is coming up this week? Well, I come face to face with a rather boisterous animal orphan, but luckily survived to tell the tale. We head out after dark, not in search of the big 5, but the little 5 million, as we go on a bug safari. And I'll be getting a bird's eye view of the Maasai Mara here and recapping on our fabulous month-long adventure in Africa. Well, you know, it's sad to have to leave them, but we better crack on with our wild encounter. And this week, it's hips and crocs. Now, I've come here to Lake Baringo today to meet 2 of Africa's most feared and dangerous animals. The paradox is that one of them is thought by many people to be cuddly, and the other one is one of my favourite animals. Now, Julius, what do you think our chances are then of seeing hippopotamus?
See hippopotamus.
And crocodile?
Crocodile.
Definite. Chris, tell me a bit about the hippos that live here in Baringo. Are they dangerous animals? A lot of people say hippos are very, very dangerous.
If you go close to them, they are dangerous, about 2 to 3 meters near to them. But if you live about 10 meters, 5 to 10 meters,
Yeah.
they're not dangerous.
So they're not going to knock us out of the boat this afternoon?
No. They won't come.
What about the crocs then? Because someone's told me that the crocs that live here in Baringo don't eat people.
Because they don't eat people, they're friendly crocs.
Friendly crocs?
They're friendly crocs, yeah, because they eat fish and the small birds.
I've got to say, crocodiles, there's something really enchanting about them. They're beautiful to look at, they're a superb predator, and the key thing is, they've been around for millions and millions of years. They existed before the dinosaurs, and of course, they survived them. So, if you were wearing one, you'd have to take your hat off to crocodiles. Just look at this. This weather's so changeable. Now it's brilliant sunshine and really, really warm. And what's more, the hippos have turned up. There seems to be a little group of them in the water here, some much larger than others. I'm not much of a hippo expert, but I would guess that the biggest ones there are the cows, and those are their offspring. The reason that hippos spend all of their day in the water is that they're one of only 3 species of animal on Earth that get sunburn. Us, pigs, and hippos. This is absolutely amazing. Normally, hippos will only ever go onto land to feed at night. They feed on grass, so they don't eat while they're in the water at all, and they'll go onshore at night, and they're normally very timid and shy, but this hippo here has gone right out in broad, sunny daylight. Look at that. You really get a sense of how big and bulky they are, which you don't when you only see their heads in the water. You can see how pink and tender its skin looks as well. No doubt he's dashing back in because he hasn't got any factor 35. Well, those were extraordinary views of hippo. I've never seen anything like it. But to get more from the crocs, I think we're going to have to go looking for them at night. Now, crocodiles are actually quite active at night, and they've got extremely acute night vision. And on that account, I'm using this camera here, which can see very well in the dark, infrared. Unfortunately, the picture is only in black and white. It does give me the opportunity to find these creatures, because they are quite timid, and myself strolling along the bank here has frightened them all into the water. Let's see what I can find. Now, you can generally pick them up because their eyes glow bright red when you shine a light onto them. And there's one there. Now, if I can just zoom in and focus, look at that. A crocodile smile in the lake night. Superb. Yep, here we are, there's another one, again in the water. It's absolutely superb, look at him. He's sunk beneath the surface. What a fine end to a fabulous day looking at a couple of creatures whose reputations really aren't deserved. They're good guys, you know. I hope they're good guys, because I've got to get back to the hotel. Well, there you are, you see, it just goes to prove crocodiles are more scared than scary. Told you so. But you know, over the years when we've been doing Wildwatch, we've met plenty of people in the south who like their scary animals, particularly the creepy crawly ones. Remember Martin Nicholas from Bracknell, that guy that exercised his deadly centipede in the bath? And then there was John Paul Lamoureux from Essex, who had a fantastic collection of spiders, including some which were free-ranging. Well, it's all very well seeing those things in captivity, but tonight I'm heading out into the African bush to meet them firsthand. At least, I certainly hope I meet them before they meet me. You You know, when most people come on safari in Africa, they're after the big five: elephant, buffalo, rhino, lion and leopard. And of course, to see these animals, they have to stay in the vehicle because they're dangerous. But if you're in the vehicle, you miss out not on the big five, but on the little 5 million, the myriad of invertebrates that there are living here. Koen Mays is one of Kenya's leading entomologists, and with his expertise, I'm looking forward to a bug safari where we should turn up all sorts of creatures, great and small.
Well, these are the whistling thorns, the famous ones. And here we have a nest of the black ants in it.
So the ants have caused the gall to be made, haven't they?
Yes, yes. This is a reaction of the tree against this ant coming and poking into it. It's like a cancer that grows on it.
What's the benefit to the plant, though?
These ants play a role in protecting the acacia against larger herbivores like elephant. Probably because the elephant doesn't want these ants crawling up his trunk. He goes to another acacia tree.
So it's a great example of an insect helping a plant whilst the plant helps the insect.
Yes, yes.
Symbiosis.
Symbiosis, that's it.
This must be good.
Yes.
Here.
Yeah, let's have a look here. Maybe we find something.
Woodlice, if nothing else.
Oh, well, maybe everything, beetles, whatever. Let's see. Oh,
superb, look at that. A
These
millipede. Look,
yes.
it's curled up like an ammonite.
Yes. It has to hide underneath these logs because that's cooler. There's a little bit of humidity over there. That's how these animals survive. They wait. During the rainy season, you can find them everywhere.
Now, these millipedes are essential members of the fauna here, aren't they? Because without them, there'd be no decomposition of the vegetable material and we'd be knee-deep in leaves.
They eat a lot. They compose a lot of litter. They can do very useful work. So if we put him back under this log, he will be protected from all kinds of predators.
Let's see what else we can find.
Yes, let's go to the next place.
Right, Koen, what have we got here then?
Well, here we have a small generator with a sheet. We're using a mercury vapor light. Now, there is not too much on the sheet because there is a little bit too much wind. It's a bit cold and we are in altitude.
You said there's not too much on there, but if we were at home in the south of England, this would be, you know, a veritable bonanza of insect life.
Okay, I've been too long in Africa then.
You're too spoiled. But I mean, there is a great diversity. There's things like this. That's a wasp.
Yes, that's a typical ichneumoniid. They are very common here on light.
And a great number of different types of beetle as well. That one's quite attractive.
Yes, these beetles are probably here all in the litter all around.
Okay, now do you think that any of these insects that are on here, however small, are new to science? Or do you think that all of these are known?
No, it's quite possible.
So you could come to Africa and if you put the time in, leave having, you know, an animal named after you. That one is...
Yeah, that's true.
Pachymus insignificus.
Insignificant, certainly. That's for sure.
Do you think there's any chance that we might be able to find something bigger, like a spider or a scorpion, something like that?
Well, for that we have to go and walk around in the bush.
Wow, look at that, that's superb. So what type of spider is it?
This is a baboon spider. This is the biggest one you find here in Africa.
It's a monster.
It's a very ferocious thing. Very fast.
Aggressive.
Very aggressive.
My
The
goodness.
fangs are about a centimetre long.
Well, what a fine end to the evening, Koen, because, you know, a lot of people come to Africa and they're impressed by the ferocity of leopards and lions. But what we've got here is an invertebrate lion, isn't it?
It's a living tyrannosaurus in terms of size.
Not a lion, but a tyrannosaur.
Yes. This is a very ferocious animal.
Well, do you know what I think? I think it's a wise zoologist that leaves a tyrannosaur in peace, actually.
Yes, we don't
Shall
want
we
to deal with this
depart
one.
before
let's
we...
depart with it.
Now, seeing that baboon spider in the wild is a bit different than seeing it in a glass case down the pet shop. But, you know, not all the animals here, big or small, are nasty and fierce. Just look at this wonderful tame warthog. Now, they look a bit hard, don't they, with their funny faces and those formidable tusks there, but those are actually used for rooting, just as wild boar and pigs would use them at home in the New Forest. Only there, of course, they'd be after acorns. Out here, he's after all sorts of exotic roots. But look at this. A neat idea, kneeling down when you're feeding. Gets your mouth closer to the ground. Hey, leave that cameraman alone. paying a visit to Nairobi's animal orphanage. Now, there are plenty of animal orphanages all across the south of England, but I'm rather hoping this one's going to have something a little bit more exotic than grey squirrels and hedgehogs. The orphanage is not only a safe haven for a huge variety of wild animals, it also provides a place where local Kenyans can learn more about their own native species. I met Joseph, the manager.
It's one of the stickiest noses and stickiest tongue, Joseph, I've ever come across. This is Betty the buffalo, yeah?
Yes, it is.
What a beauty. But tell me a bit about the orphanage and its aims and objectives.
Okay. The orphanage was started to take care of sick and orphaned animals because when the park wardens would go on their park patrols, they would come across an orphan and then they would look after the orphan in their garage or something. It wasn't a good place to look after. So this facility was set up to look after sick and orphaned animals way back in 1964.
64?
Yes.
It's been going a long time.
It's been going a long time, yes.
Now it's very popular with young people, plenty of school groups.
This is the opportunity they had to visit the animals at very close range and look at how they look like, their size, the color of the skin and so on. It may be the only opportunity they have to see some of these wild animals.
These fabulous 6-month-old cheetah cubs were found abandoned in the southern part of Kenya, where there were plenty of grasslands. You see, female cheetahs have to go off and hunt by themselves and then have no help from the male whatsoever, so they have to leave the cubs behind. They are frequently killed by lions or disturbed by people, and as a consequence, quite a few cheetah cubs come to the orphanage from that part of the country. Now, of course, hand-rearing them means it's going to be very difficult to put them back into the wild, but in future they have plans to change their method of upbringing so that they can attempt this very difficult process. You know, I often call cheetahs honorary birds. They're such good mammals that they're almost birds. They're beautifully adapted to their lifestyle. They've got this very long back and this tail, which will grow into a fantastic organ of balance. Because they run so fast and need to get so much oxygen into their lungs to do so, they've got the biggest nostrils of all cats. They've got that lovely tear stripe down underneath their eye, which stops the glare coming off of the planes when they're hunting. And of course, they're super lightweight for high speeds. They do 7 or 8 meters in a single stride. Don't you? This is Minor. Now, he's an eland that was found in the southern part of the Rift Valley, abandoned and not with the herd, which is where a young antelope should be, the safety in numbers concept. And he arrived here in the orphanage before he was even weaned. Now, at the moment, he's very small, although he looks large, because eland are the largest of all of the antelope. And when they get big, they acquire a very formidable set of horns. In fact, Minor's horns here are going to become major, and they are going to span up to about this height with a twist in the bottom of them. Just look at those eyes, lovely long lashes. This is Moyali the lion. He's about 9 months old, he's a male, and already he's extremely strong. And of course that's the key to a lion's success, his strength. Now, Moyali was rescued from a family who were keeping him illegally. You just can't keep wild animals here in Kenya. You need a licence from the Kenyan Wildlife Service to keep lions like this. And one thing you may have noticed is that his tail's a bit short. And that's because for some bizarre reason, they snipped the tip off, perhaps to mark him as their lion. And the thing about lions is that they're very muscular. And they like a bit of rough and tumble, don't they? Hey, did you see him slapping me with his paw there? Because that's exactly what they do in the wild. They slap down their prey with those massive paws. Just look at the size of them already. Now, as you can see, Moyali here is circling round and round. And that's because he wants to get on my back. And if I were to go down and let him climb on, he'd more than likely bite me in the back of the neck, which is what lions do. And then maybe switch round to the front and try and constrict my windpipe. Now, of course, he'd only be playing at this stage, but if he was fully grown, it'd last a matter of seconds. Now, just like all young animals, when they're playing, Moyali's getting a bit too excited now, and his claws are out, and he's getting a bit too boisterous. So I think it's about time to call it a day. But you know what strikes me is that you can visit any number of animal orphanages in the UK, but you never run the risk of getting mauled by a lion. So it's never this exciting. Is it? You big bully. Well, that's my opinion, but then I'm slightly mad, and if getting mauled by moyali isn't your thing, there are some top places to visit in the south which lend a hand to other animal orphans. This wildcat may not be the size of its cousin, but it's got the attitude to match, and you'll find him and others at the British Wildlife Centre in Surrey. At Wildwood in Kent, you can come face to face with another predator from Britain's past, the elusive wolf. And finally, if you want a close encounter with some aquatic orphans, then the New Forest Otter and Owl Park is where you should head. Well, sadly, our illuminating expedition to the Dark Continent has drawn to a close, and it's time for me to head back to the shores of the south of England. It may even be sunnier there, you never know. But before we go, take a look at this, because these are the highlights that we simply couldn't squeeze into all of the other programmes, and some of them are pretty special. An early morning's hot air balloon ride over the Maasai Mara was the perfect way to get a bird's eye view of the Great Serengeti Plains. During the flight, I had expectations of seeing herds of zebra, harems of impala, but when we serenely glided right over a black rhino, I was left absolutely breathless. Superb. Just as my balloon ride was coming to an end, we drifted right over a huge herd of wildebeest. And wherever you find these, their arch enemy is never far away. What a way to see a lion. Now, most people don't give hyenas a second glance. They think they're scabby, skanky, smelly, scavenging animals. But one day, on our route back to camp, we came across a den full of baby hyenas, and weren't they cute? These babies may look like chocolate box material, but even at this young age, their jaw strength is immense. They'll use it to crunch through scavenged carcasses in order to obtain the calcium-rich bone marrow. Just as I was wondering where Mum could be, she returned to the den to make sure her children weren't misbehaving, or maybe it was to keep a watchful eye on us. Now, every once in a while you get extraordinarily lucky, and something I've always wanted to see all of my life was the famous event that takes place here twice a year, the wildebeest crossing the Mara River back into Tanzania. It's a spectacle of migration, and we just happened to turn up on exactly the right day at the right time. We've been here for a couple of hours. The wildebeest are obviously very apprehensive, and who can blame them? There's some thumping great crocodiles down there, and plenty of evidence that the process is going to be tricky. There's carcasses everywhere, some of them being picked at by vultures and marabou storks. But it's extremely hot, and I can only imagine that those poor wildebeest are getting thirsty. If it happens, what will be a remarkable event for me, because I've never seen it before, is something that's happened here for thousands of years. Well, they're on their way. Once one got started walking across the river, the rest have taken in. This is a bit of a free-for-all. Just look at that, it's absolutely incredible. Well, there we are then. That's the end of our series of Wildwatch out of Africa. I hope you've enjoyed seeing all of these exotic creatures. Elephants, hippos, crocodiles, eagles, vultures. Pretty splendid stuff. But you know, I always think home is where the heart is. And I'm not joking when I say I'm quite looking forward to going back to my own back garden to look at some squirrels and maybe a goldfinch on my bird table. What a treat that would be. Goodbye. Fantastic.